Whispers at Westlake Station. The evening rush at Westlake Station buzzed with the usual symphony of footsteps, announcements, and the occasional screech of arriving trains. Marcus Reeves stood against a pillar, scrolling mindlessly through emails that could wait until morning. His tailored charcoal suit and perpetual frown marked him as someone who existed apart from the crowd, present in body but miles away in spirit. He'd perfected the art of urban isolation, moving through life's spaces without truly inhabiting them. At 36, Marcus had built a reputation as one of the city's most formidable corporate attorneys. What his colleagues didn't know was how empty his downtown penthouse felt each night, how the silence had become both his comfort and his prison. A high-pitched wail cut through his thoughts. Marcus looked up, instinctively locating its source. A small boy, perhaps 5 or 6, standing alone by the information kiosk. The child's face was red with tears, his blue backpack clutched against his chest like a shield. Marcus hesitated. He should help, shouldn't he? But what would he say? Children were mysteries to him, their emotions too raw, too honest. Before he could decide, a woman in scrubs knelt beside the boy. "Hey there," she said, her voice gentle but clear even across the busy station. "My name's Olivia. I'm a nurse. Are you lost?" The boy nodded, hiccuping through tears. "That's okay," she continued, remaining at his eye level. "We'll figure this out together. What's your name?" Jamie." The boy managed between sobs. Marcus found himself drifting closer, drawn by the quiet confidence in her approach. The woman, Olivia, had dark, curly hair pulled back in a practical bun, warm brown skin, and eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled at the child. "Jamie, that's a great name. I bet someone's looking for you right now and feeling pretty worried. Was it your mom or dad you were with?" "My grandma," Jamie whispered. "We were going to see the fish at the aquarium." Olivia nodded seriously. "The aquarium is awesome. I love the octopus best. Who's your favorite?" The distraction worked. Jamie's shoulders relaxed slightly. "The sharks. Good choice. Very brave." She pulled out her phone. "Let's find your grandma, shark expert. What's her name?" As Olivia helped Jamie contact station security and kept him calm with questions about marine life, Marcus watched, transfixed. She hadn't hesitated, hadn't looked around hoping someone else would step in. Her kindness seemed as natural as breathing. Security arrived within minutes, and soon an announcement echoed through the station. Less than 5 minutes later, an elderly woman rushed toward them, relief washing over her face. "Jamie!" The reunion was swift and emotional, the grandmother alternating between hugging the boy and thanking Olivia profusely. "It was nothing," Olivia insisted. "He was very brave." After they departed, Olivia checked her watch and hurried toward Platform 3, the same platform on Marcus's ticket. He followed, keeping a respectful distance until they boarded the same car. As fate would have it, the only remaining seats placed them directly across from each other. Their eyes met briefly. Hers were tired but kind, his cautious but curious. "That was good, what you did back there," Marcus said, surprising himself by breaking his own rule of trained silence. Olivia looked up, a small smile forming. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," he replied with unexpected certainty. "They wouldn't have." The train lurched forward, carrying them into the gathering dusk, strangers connected by a moment of simple humanity that had briefly illuminated the shadows of Marcus's carefully constructed solitude. Echoes of kindness. 3 days after the station encounter, Marcus spotted Olivia at Thornfield Cafe, 2 blocks from his office. She sat alone by the window, medical journals spread across the table, a forgotten mug of tea at her elbow. He hesitated, coffee in hand, then surprised himself by approaching. "Mind if I join you?" "All the other tables are taken." Olivia looked up, recognition dawning slowly. Train station guy, she said with a smile. Of course. Marcus Reeves, he offered, extending his hand. Olivia Bennett, pediatric nurse at Memorial. They fell into conversation easily. Olivia spoke about her work in the children's oncology ward, the heartbreak and the triumphs. Marcus found himself sharing more than he intended about his legal practice, though carefully skirting the edges of his personal life. Corporate law must be fascinating, Olivia remarked, though her tone suggested she believed otherwise. Marcus laughed, a rusty sound he barely recognized. It pays the bills, but I doubt it does for the world what your work does. Everyone has their purpose, she replied, though I admit I couldn't imagine spending my days in boardrooms fighting over decimal points. Is that what you think I do? Marcus raised an eyebrow, finding himself oddly concerned with her impression. Isn't it? Her challenge was gentle but direct. Their conversation stretched beyond his lunch hour. For the first time in years, Marcus called his office to reschedule a meeting. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed with a frequency that seemed beyond coincidence. They shared brief conversations at the station, occasional lunches, and once, unexpectedly, found themselves at the same community orchestra performance. Do you play? Olivia asked during intermission, gesturing toward the stage. I used to. Piano. The admission felt like revealing a secret. My sister was the talented one, though, violin. Was? Olivia caught the past tense immediately. Marcus stiffened. She died 8 years ago. Olivia didn't offer platitudes or prying questions. Instead, she simply touched his arm lightly. I'm glad you still come to concerts. That night, walking her to her bus stop, Marcus realized something had shifted. The city streets, once just thoroughfares between obligations, now held possibility. The evening air carried conversation rather than silence, and Olivia's presence beside him felt both unsettling and necessary, like the first deep breath after too long underwater. When she mentioned a weekend volunteer project at a children's shelter, Marcus surprised them both by offering to help. The old Marcus, the one who existed before the night at Westlake Station, would never have sacrificed precious weekend hours. But watching her eyes light up at his offer, he wondered if perhaps he'd been measuring the value of time all wrong. Fair. Warning, Olivia said with a grin as they parted. Volunteering with children involves getting messy. That suit of yours might not survive. Marcus looked down at his immaculate attire, then back at her. Maybe it's time for a change anyway. As he walked home to his empty penthouse that night, Marcus realized he had laughed more in the past 3 weeks than he had in years. And something else. The hollow ache that had been his constant companion since Natalie's death had, for brief moments in Olivia's presence, receded to a manageable distance. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. Comfort had become dangerous territory for Marcus Reeves, because comfort could be taken away, just as Natalie had been. The weight of ghosts. The children's shelter was housed in a converted Victorian in the city's East End. Marcus arrived in jeans and a sweater, clothes he'd almost forgotten he owned, carrying coffee and pastries from Thornfield. Olivia met him. On the porch, hair tied back with a bandana, already speckled with paint. You came, she said, surprise evident in her voice. I said I would. He handed her a coffee, though I'm not sure how useful I'll be. The day unfolded in a blur of activity. Marcus found himself assembling bookshelves, mounting a basketball, hoop, and eventually, at the insistence of several children, allowing his hands to be covered in paint as they created a mural for the dining room. You're good with them, Olivia remarked during a brief break. Natural, even. Marcus watched a young girl carefully tracing her painted handprint beside his own on the wall. My sister volunteered at places like this. She used to drag me along. Sometimes. Tell me about her, Olivia said quietly. The request caught him off guard. People rarely asked anymore. They assumed the subject too painful or forgotten. But looking at Olivia's open expression, Marcus found himself wanting to share. Natalie was brilliant, passionate. She played violin with the symphony but spent most of her free time teaching music to underprivileged kids. He paused, memories washing over him. We were opposites in many ways. I was always the cautious one, planning 10 steps ahead. She lived entirely in the moment. "What happened to her?" Olivia asked gently. "Car accident, hit by a drunk driver, on her way home from a benefit concert." The words came out clipped, factual. She was 31. Olivia didn't speak immediately. When she did, her words surprised him. "She sounds like someone who filled every moment with life." "She did," Marcus agreed, feeling the familiar tightness in his chest easing slightly. "After she died, I threw myself into work. It seemed safer, somehow." "Safer than what?" "Than caring about anything that could disappear." Olivia nodded slowly. "I understand that instinct. In my work, I see families lose children. Some close themselves off completely. Others somehow find a way to open themselves wider to the world." "And which is healthier?" Marcus asked, though he already knew her answer. "Which do you think Natalie would have chosen?" The question pierced him. Before he could respond, they were called back to work, but Olivia's words echoed in his mind throughout. The afternoon. Later that week, Olivia canceled their planned coffee meeting. A young patient had taken a turn for the worse, and she couldn't leave. Marcus found himself outside the pediatric ward at Memorial Hospital that evening, holding takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant. He found her in the family lounge, eyes red-rimmed but dry, staring out the window at the city lights. "Tough day?" he asked, offering the food. "We lost him." Her voice was steady but threadbare. 7 years old. He fought so hard. Marcus sat beside her, at a loss for words. Finally, he asked, "How do you do it? Come back day after day, knowing this could happen?" Olivia unwrapped the food slowly. "Because the alternative is worse. Not caring doesn't protect you, it just leaves you empty." She looked up at him. "I think you know that better than most." They ate in companionable silence. When Olivia rested her head briefly against his shoulder, exhaustion finally overtaking her, Marcus didn't pull away. Instead, he found himself thinking about Natalie, about the vibrant way she'd lived her too short life, and wondering what she would think of the fortress he'd built around himself since losing her. For the first time, he wondered if grief had become an excuse rather than a reason. Bridges and barriers spring arrived suddenly, transforming the city almost overnight. Marcus found himself noticing things he'd overlooked for years: cherry blossoms along the courthouse walk, the changing quality of light in the evenings, the sound of street musicians returning to the plaza outside his office. His colleagues noticed the change in him, too. The ruthless attorney who regularly worked 18-hour days now occasionally left at reasonable hours. He'd been seen smiling in the elevator. Most shocking of all, he'd declined a high-profile case that would have required canceling plans for a weekend hiking trip. A trip with a friend, he'd said vaguely when pressed. That friend was waiting at the trailhead when he arrived, looking more at home in hiking boots and a worn backpack than he would have imagined possible. City boy. "Made it," Olivia teased as he approached. "I half expected you to back out." "I considered it," Marcus admitted, particularly after checking the weather forecast. A little rain never hurt anyone. She handed him a walking stick. "Besides, the best views come after the hardest climbs." The hike was challenging, but Marcus found himself enjoying the physical exertion, the simple focus on breath and movement. They talked easily as they climbed, about work, books, music, and increasingly about themselves. With each conversation, the careful boundaries Marcus had maintained for years seemed to erode further. Near the summit, they paused at an overlook. The valley spread below them, the city visible as a distant cluster of buildings shimmering in spring sunlight. "Thank you," Marcus said suddenly. "For what?" Making you climb a mountain in questionable weather? For making me see things differently. He gestured toward the view. I've lived here 15 years and never done this. Olivia studied him. What else haven't you done? The question hung between them, layered with meaning. Marcus found himself moving closer, the tension of unspoken possibility drawing them together. When he finally kissed her, it felt both inevitable and extraordinary, like coming home to a place he'd never been before. The weeks that followed were a revelation. Marcus rediscovered parts of himself he'd thought permanently lost. The ability to plan for joy rather than merely avoid pain, to see beyond immediate obligations to possibilities. With Olivia, he ventured to art exhibits, community gardens, even a terrifying but exhilarating attempt at rock climbing. Then came the call from Philip Harrington, senior partner at his firm, a major international case, the kind that makes careers, and they wanted Marcus to lead it. 6 months minimum in London, possibly extending to 2 years. It's an incredible opportunity, Philip emphasized. The kind that comes once in a career. Marcus found himself staring at the photo on his desk, taken by a stranger on their hiking trip, Olivia laughing as she pointed out something on the horizon, Marcus looking not at the view but at her. "Can I have time to think about it?" he asked, surprising himself and Philip both. That evening, he prepared to tell Olivia about the offer over dinner at his place. But when she arrived, her expression stopped him. "What's wrong?" he asked, taking her coat. "Remember Zoe, the 12-year-old with the rare lymphoma I told you about?" Olivia's voice wavered. "She's being transferred to Boston Children's for an experimental treatment. They've asked me to go with her, to help establish the protocol there." She took a deep breath. "It would be 6 months, possibly longer." The irony struck Marcus like a physical blow. He told her about the London offer, and they stood in his kitchen, the carefully prepared meal forgotten, facing the first real test of what they'd begun building together. "What are you thinking?" Olivia finally asked. Marcus looked around his pristine apartment at the life he'd constructed with such precision. "I'm thinking that before I met you, this decision would have been simple. And now? Now nothing seems simple anymore." He reached for her hand. "But maybe that's not such a bad thing." The journey. Home. The Boston and London opportunities created an unexpected fork in the road. After much discussion, they made a practical decision. They would each accept their respective positions, maintaining their relationship long distance. Modern technology would bridge the gap, they reasoned, and both opportunities were too significant to decline. 3 months into this arrangement, Marcus stood in his London flat overlooking the Thames, listening to Olivia describe her day via video call. The connection was clear, but something essential was lost in the translation from person to pixels. "You look tired," she observed. "Long week," Marcus replied. "The Robertson deposition went sideways." "Did you win anyway?" Marcus nodded, but found himself unable to muster the satisfaction such victories once brought. "The firm's pleased. They're talking about extending my contract another year." Olivia's expression shifted subtly. "That would be 3 years total?" "Potentially." He hesitated. "How's the protocol development going?" "Promising. Zoe's responding well to treatment." Her smile was genuine, but tinged with something like resignation. "They've asked me to consider staying on permanently." The silence that followed contained all they weren't saying. Their practical solution was working on paper, both excelling professionally, but something vital was slipping away with each passing week. That night, unable to sleep, Marcus found himself looking through photos on his phone. He paused on one from their last weekend together, a candid shot of Olivia gazing thoughtfully at a sculpture in the park. The image brought a physical ache to his chest. The next morning, He called his sister's best friend Rachel, now a concert violinist he'd maintained sporadic contact with over the years. "If Natalie were here," he asked without preamble, "what would she tell me to do?" Rachel didn't hesitate. "She'd tell you to stop hiding behind your desk and go get the life you want." 2 days later, Marcus sat across from Philip Harrington in a London conference room, explaining his decision to step back from the case. "This is career suicide, Marcus," Philip warned. "Partnership was all but guaranteed." "I know." Marcus was surprised by his own calm. "But I've realized something. I'm good at what I do here, but it doesn't make me feel alive. And I've discovered that's important to me now." He didn't fly directly to Boston as planned. Instead, he returned to their city, to the empty apartment that had never felt like a home until Olivia had filled it with her presence. He spent a week reorganizing his life, making calls, researching possibilities. Then he boarded a train to Boston. He found Olivia at a small park near the hospital, reading on a bench during her lunch break. When she looked up and saw him, her book fell forgotten to the ground. "Marcus, what are you—" "I quit the London position," he said without preamble. "You what? Why would you—" "Because I realized something." He sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "After Natalie died, I stopped believing that anything lasting was possible. I built a life around the assumption that everything valuable eventually disappears. So it's better not to value anything too deeply." Olivia listened, her eyes never leaving his face. "But then I met you," Marcus continued. "Watching you with that little boy at the station, I saw someone who understood how fragile everything is. You see it every day in your work, but who reaches out anyway. Who connects? Who cares?" "Marcus, I'm not asking you to leave Boston," he interrupted. "I know your work here matters, but I've applied for positions with legal aid organizations here focusing on medical advocacy for children. And if that doesn't work out, I'll find something else. Because I finally understand what Natalie knew all along, that a life spent avoiding loss isn't really a life at all." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "But your career was never going to be enough." He smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. "I don't know exactly what happens next, but I know I want to figure it out with you." Olivia studied him for a long moment, then broke into a smile that illuminated everything around them. "You know," she said, wiping away a tear, "for a brilliant lawyer, it took you an awfully long time to figure out something that was obvious from the moment you spoke to me at that train station." "What's that?" She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "That some connections are worth risking everything for." As they sat together on that Boston Park bench, Marcus thought about the strange trajectory that had brought him here, how a single moment of witnessed kindness had cracked open the careful fortress he'd built around his heart, how learning to see the world through Olivia's eyes had gradually taught him to recognize himself again. And he realized that perhaps this was the truest form of coming home, not to a place, but to the person you were always meant to be.